Hello, ladies. I hope everyone has enjoyed their evening this far. I know it's weird us not being in person together this year. I was determined to try to help make something happen, with high hopes that we could all be together again next year. I miss looking out and seeing those creative tables, smiles, laughter, and genuine hearts. This year's theme is brought to you by one of my most creative places, the shower. I don't know about you, but I always have these crazy ideas in the weirdest places. Poor Garrett, my husband, we have little postcards and pens laying all over the house next to the Barbie doll accessories. Like some of you, mom brain is also a big struggle of mine. But anyways, grace upon grace hit me hard this year. Going into a pandemic, I would have never thought that our theme from last year, faith over fear, could be so empowering for the year we had to come. I wanted the same feeling, the same empowerment that we felt last year. With much prayer and many talks, I felt that grace upon grace was it. But what is grace? Who could I ask to speak on grace? Do we know a grace expert? Was grace going to impact you all? Should we talk about something or maybe someone? See, doubt started to kick in. Then I had an idea to help bring the many sides of grace to you. See, we can't sum up grace up into one sentence. Grace is a big umbrella. You see what I did there, my teachers? An umbrella with a multitude of different areas to go. Grace isn't something that you purchase or earn. It is something that is given to you as a gift. And when you receive it, you immediately realize how much you needed it all along. And you wonder how you could have lived so long without it. You see, God's grace is the most powerful in the universe. So I would have to argue that it's the most beautiful word in the universe. Close to faith, in my opinion. It reaches you where you are and takes you where God wants you to be. It has the power to do something that nothing else can do. Transform you at the casual core of who you are. As a human being, your heart. Grace comes in many different forms and shows up to people in many different ways. We have a few testimonies of those that have seen grace and want to share their power of grace upon grace with you. For it is by grace you have been saved. Ephesians 2:8.
Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Take all my having these hands and multiply, God, all that I am, and find my heart on the altar again. Set me on fire, set me on fire. Take all I have in these hands and multiply, God, all that I am, and find my heart on the altar again. Set me on fire, set me on fire. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. My heart stands in awe of your name, your mighty love stands strong to the end. You will fulfill your purpose in me. You won't forsake me, you will be with me. Here I am, God, arms wide open, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken, oh gracefully, all to Jesus now, all to Jesus now, holding nothing back, holding nothing back. I surrender, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. All to Jesus now, all to Jesus now, holding nothing back, holding nothing back. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken.
There are many different definitions of the word grace. It can be used to describe the beautiful and fluid movements of a ballerina, or the act of honoring someone with your presence. But when life is going hard, you've made wrong choices, or are in need of a little bit of forgiveness, those aren't the meanings that you care about. Instead, you want the grace that God or someone else shows by not giving you the punishment or treatment that you deserve after doing something wrong. It's the kind treatment and extended patience that we all need from time to time. A quote from Charles Swindoll is a pretty accurate definition of grace for me. Grace releases and affirms. It doesn't smother. Grace values the dignity of individuals. It doesn't destroy. Grace supports and encourages. It isn't jealous or suspicious. If you need a little grace, it's always available to you. Not all people are experienced at or even good at showing grace to others, but God's grace is always available to you. In my faith journey, grace has been bestowed upon me in many different ways. Some of those require physical closeness, but many of them do not. One example of grace that I am reminded of every single year, many of you gave to me. And you probably don't even realize that I still treasure it. 9 years ago, our firstborn, Aiden Thomas, was stillborn in September. I was facing our first Christmas. I should have still been pregnant, but instead it was raw and exhausting. The grief was fresh and overwhelming. I had no idea how to find the hope of the season in such a place of darkness. Several people asked me what they could do. How do you help someone with a broken heart? So I threw out a suggestion. Ornaments. We had barely been married for 2 years, so we didn't have a ton of Christmas ornaments for our tree. I thought maybe ornaments to fill our tree and remind us of Aiden would bring me peace. And you showed out. And still, 9 Christmases later, we still receive ornaments with his name. Each year we have to put up a tree just for Aiden and his ornaments. And I know where every single one of them came from. And as we put up the tree, we tell stories of the people that gave them to us. And we say a prayer of thanks that each person extended me that grace. They recognized my heart and crossed a divide. In a season that can still be difficult, I get to look at a 6-foot tree full of his name. It is grace that doesn't require physical touch or even words. It's merely just a gift of recognition and value. But grace isn't only something that we need. It's something that we can show to others. If someone has treated you wrong, you can choose to show them grace. This could be as simple as overlooking someone's bad attitude towards you because you know they're struggling in their personal life, or offering to help someone who otherwise would never ask for it. While you can't control if other people will show you grace when you need it, you can choose to give grace to others. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. When I think of grace, I can't help but think of Aiden. Our story has grace written all over it. The darkest, hardest story, and it's full of grace. If that isn't a God thing, I don't know what is. For Aiden's 2nd birthday, I wanted to honor his life. I didn't want to be sad. I wanted to find a way to celebrate and give back. It doesn't make that day any easier, but I needed it to have purpose. And so Aiden's elephants came to fruition. Over 8 years, we have donated over 800 elephants to UAMS's neonatal bereavement program called Love Lives. The elephants are given to families experiencing prenatal and infant loss. It's our way of making sure that these families know they are not alone. Over the years, I have had families reach out when they've received an elephant. I get to hear stories of how Aiden's name is now a part of someone else's story. His elephants have been the comfort in a mother's arms when she couldn't hold her baby. Siblings have kept the elephants as a reminder of their baby. And even some of the elephants have stayed with the babies so that they had a stuffed animal with them always. Grace. Showing up for these families in ways that only they know they need. It has nothing to do with me. It's Jesus. He is taking care of his people in the darkest moments, and the elephants are merely a physical reminder. Grace in action. Perhaps the part of grace that is the most healing is that it almost always comes back around. This past September, we took 75 elephants to Washington Regional in Fayetteville. Aiden was born in Fayetteville while we were out of town. In all these years, I've never been able to go back to the hospital. This year, with COVID and knowing that families were truly alone in these moments, the time felt right. I needed to bring Aiden back to where it all started. And the overwhelming grace that was given to me was like nothing that I could have ever expected. I was there to do for others, but I received grace that day. My biggest fear was walking back into that hospital and being flooded with the memories. Instead, we were greeted in the most peaceful and simple courtyard. Nurses, doctors, administrators all came out to meet us and to hear Aiden's story. And in the process of telling his story, it happened. They recognized the nurse that was with me from the stories. And in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of social distancing, I got a connection filled with grace in a place that I never thought I would be able to go back to. And now Aiden's elephants are back where he was born. I've already had nurses and families reach out from Northwest Arkansas, and every single time the story is of love and grace. Grace is big. It heals even the most broken, but it comes in the smallest acts. From a Christmas ornament, food when life is just simply overwhelming for someone, a text of prayer, or even as simple as saying Aiden's name. All are acts of grace. This year, we had to adapt. We had to learn how to slow down. We had to learn how to be okay with an empty calendar. We had to learn how to stay home. Stay home to take care of each other, right? As I've reflected on the past year, I would change it just a little. Stay home, but also take care of each other. Changing 2 words in that sentence completely changes the meaning. So how are we supposed to do that when we are socially distanced, not gathering in large groups, and watching the numbers go up with no end in sight? Grace. Grace upon grace. As women, we are typically the caretakers. If you're anything like me, that means that you have been planning and prepping, cleaning and sanitizing, organizing and attempting to entertain the little people. We have been so focused inside our homes, we may have lost that connection with our sisters. We might have missed so much in each other's lives, big things, little things, all the things that sustain our relationships. In staying apart, what happens if we've forgotten to actually take care of each other in the name of not spreading the virus? This is our chance. I want to challenge each of us to rekindle that connection. Who do you know that needs God's grace? I'm guessing it's you and me. This is our chance. I want to challenge each of us to rekindle that connection. Who do you know that needs grace? I'm guessing we all do. And if we all look outwards and reach across the divide that is COVID, we may find that we are actually taking care of one another. And the word for 2021 will no longer be COVID, but rather grace.
When I was first asked to speak at this event, and I was told that the theme was grace upon grace, I was overwhelmed because the word grace encompasses so much. So to help me focus on how do I want to approach grace as it relates to our family, I researched the word grace. And the Greek word is cherish, which means favor, blessing, or kindness. Other interpretations of what grace means included the following: the peace of God given to the restless, the love that cares and stoops and rescues, the unconditional love towards a person, mercy, getting what we don't deserve and not getting what we do deserve, the love of God shown to others, words such as faith, blessing, help, love, support, and forgiveness. In looking at everything that encompasses grace, I thought about our journey with our son, Zach, who is diagnosed at 23 months old with stage 4 brain cancer. One day he was a healthy kid, and the next he was terribly ill. And he had a tumor the size of a lemon with metastasis of cancer cells in his spine. To say that it was a whirlwind is an understatement. But in looking back at the journey we were on, the journey we are on now, and the journey that is in our future, I realize that God's grace was with us the entire time. And the journey thus far, I basically broke it down into 3 phases: receiving God's grace, accepting God's grace, and being able to pay it forward and allowing God to use me to give God's grace to others. When I talked about receiving God's grace, and in thinking about receiving God's grace, it was very challenging. Steve and I are very, very independent people. We're very stubborn. And to say the least, being vulnerable is not easy. So when Zach was diagnosed, we had an outpouring of love and support beyond belief. God knew we would need the help, love, and support, God's grace, and utilized others to provide grace to our family. We had strong people in our lives to give us grace without allowing us to refuse, and we needed that. We didn't know initially how much, but we did. You know the term God sent. Well, the way that I thought about it was God's grace. There were numerous people who were there for me and for our family. Of course, all the doctors and nurses at Arkansas Children's Hospital, that's pretty much a given. But there were certain moments that stood out to me in receiving God's grace, grace being given to us through others. The three people that were the most profound, that I distinctly can remember the moment and can look back upon that and think we were receiving God's grace, were Amy Goddard, Tom Lieblong, and Sherry Jennings. Now, Amy Goddard and I have known each other for over 20 years. She's been my rock. She was there from the very get-go. She sat in the consultation room after the diagnosis, and she knows me so well, she knew I wasn't going to remember everything. So she had her little pad and pen, and she wrote down everything that the doctors were saying, allowing me and Steve to be able to comfort each other. It was overwhelming, but she was there guiding us along the way, and she didn't even know it. She planned blood drive to honor Zach. She would bring us clothing, and she would go to our messy, messy house and pick up the things that we needed without any judgment. And believe me, it was really messy at the time. She was our strength when we didn't know that we needed it. She was our support and help, and she helped guide us along the way. Tom Lieblong came to our house and to the hospital numerous times, and he could always make you laugh, and he could also always make you think. And one time when we were at the hospital, and Zach, we weren't sure if he was going to have a shunt or not. He had kind of taken a couple of steps back. And Tom could tell that we were just exhausted, tired, and just stressed out. And so I remember him standing there in the hospital room, and he stated, no matter what is going on or how terrible of a day that you're having, you must always find a way to glorify God. What he was telling us was to always keep your focus on God. God was sending us help through Tom by saying, hey, I'm here. I'll get you through this. All you have to do is accept the grace I'm providing you. Sherry Jennings, a big force to be reckoned with. When she makes up her mind, there's no stopping her. And God knew us. He knew we weren't going to accept help easily. So enter Sherry. When we were at the hospital, she sat down on the couch with me, and she basically said, this is what we're going to do. Our Sunday school class, Pairs and Spares at the time, now The Journey, they wanted to do T-shirts and bracelets for us and to do a fundraiser to help us with costs. And so Sherry laid out the plan, and Steve and I were like, well, you guys really don't have to do that. And she said, nope, it's not going to happen. We're doing it. And the Lord sent His grace using Sherry to provide the support and to be the blessing we didn't even know that we needed. Because in the peak of the storm, sometimes we're not always able to see God's grace or willing to receive it because we don't recognize Him holding it out for us to take. We were receiving God's grace over grace over grace. Kind of like snow building up into a snowball, growing bigger and bigger until basically you have the abominable snowman. It's amazing how God sends His grace through others and how we were receiving it, not truly even knowing it, and having trouble accepting it. But there was a moment during Zach's treatment where it all finally clicked, where that snowball built into the abominable snowman, and he came bursting in. You finally see what's going on, who is in control, and giving everything to God, while trusting Him completely. That moment came when Zach was receiving his last chemotherapy, high-dose chemotherapy with a stem cell rescue. His respirations were high, his heart rate was over 200, and his blood pressure was through the roof. We had gone back and forth to PICU, the pediatric ICU, and the last time, Dr. Sailors, our oncologist, and Dr. Green, the head of PICU, decided that Zach needed to be on a ventilator. Well, he had several complicating factors along with that, and so a pulmonologist came in and he wanted to do a bronchoscopy on him. He wasn't stable enough to do it, and the risks were high of him not surviving. So Steve and I actually asked to stay in the room while the procedure was done, and the pulmonologist kind of hesitated, but our doctors looked at each other and then looked at him and said they can stay. During that procedure and seeing how distressed Zach was, I finally realized, number one, I was not in control. I could not make it better. And that I had to be willing to give it all to God and accept His grace, my faith, but His unconditional love, support, help, guidance, and peace. Giving it all to God was not easy, but the peace that we got from God's grace was amazing. It's taking that leap of faith and knowing no matter what happens, God does not make mistakes. And He never promised we wouldn't endure suffering or pain, but He does promise that He loves us unconditionally. He gives us grace. It was a pivotal moment for me, so profound that I can literally still feel the relief and the peace that I received at that moment. I remember I asked my sister Tracy, how could we accept God's grace and all the help from people surrounding us, including a couple who donated their entire Christmas savings to us and forewent presents to each other. Her answer was simple. You accept it and you say thank you. I said, how do you do that? And she said, because people want to help so badly, and this is their way of supporting you. God wants to help us so badly, and He wants us to reach out to Him for support. All we have to do is accept it, say thank you, and pay it forward. So the last phase that we're in now, and we're continuing on, is paying it forward and allowing God to use us to give God's grace to others. Zach's journey is ongoing. He's now 6 years cancer-free, and he continues to have numerous doctor's appointments. But he's full of energy and full of life, and we are so grateful and blessed. We now accept it with open arms. God's grace is amazing. Because of our experience, we're able to reach out to other families going through similar, not the same, but similar experiences, hoping to give them hope, providing them support when they need it, and peace when they are in pain. We visit them in the hospital, talk to them on the phone, and answer questions to give them some sort of peace of mind. We talk about Zach's journey, and honestly, Zach's journey has brought two people that we know of to God. Grace upon grace upon grace is a great theme. It reminds me of the sun's rays. Each beam touches so many things before it finally reaches the ground. The rays spread out in all areas. It's amazing how God's grace is like the sun's rays. All you have to do is reach out and accept the light, feel the warmth, and the unconditional love of God. I'd like to end my testimony with a verse from the translation of NIV, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 15. All of this is for your benefit, so that the grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving to overflow to the glory of God. Thank you.
My focus this year is a little different, as I wanted to shift the focus on us as women. We wear many different hats, such as mom, wife, daughter, sister, caregiver, employee, coach, teacher, and so on and so forth. One of the most important titles that we wear, though, is Christian. You see, we live in a time where everything we do is looked at and unfortunately judged. I felt like I was always in the know of who I was. In high school and most of college, I lived a pretty easy, great life. I was active in church. My social life was great. I worked really hard on that one. My grades were enough, and I had plans and dreams. You see, I knew who I was, and I knew where I was going. And I had a million ways planned on how I was going to get there. I was one of those weird people who never changed their major. I was going to major in marketing since 8th grade. I was a face many people knew. I was still a teenager, though, don't get me wrong. I didn't tell my mom a lot of the stuff I did. Sorry. But I hadn't really faced any big challenges. The last time I spoke at a women's banquet was during this time in my life. I talked about life and how it's like a freeway, and you can get off and get on, but there's always an on-ramp back on. Fast forward from my perfect life to my junior year of college, when all of that came to a halt. When my sin became visible. June of 2017, I got the biggest positive test of my life. And I can be completely honest, it was not from the managerial accounting class I had taken for the 3rd time. I was pregnant. Here I was, a sinner, a Christian, and was not married, and a year away from graduating. But with the biggest blessing coming, that was not part of the plan. My immediate thought was I was an embarrassment and shame to my family. I was in a really dark place for a few weeks. I didn't know what was going on or what was going to happen. I knew I loved the little sweet pea in my belly. I knew I had a great support system, but I had a lot of questions. I kept faith, but it was just enough to keep me afloat. But that's all it was. I was caught in a sin. I heard the voices of people talking about me. I was hurt by so many actions of people who I thought would always have my back. They turned their back on me because I was no longer the perfect Christian girl, the image that I portrayed. I was a sinner, and when I needed them the most, they turned their back on me. I closed off many circles. I decided for the time being, I needed to recluse to my support. I needed to grab on tight and hold on. I needed to find a new plan and a new way to look at this pregnancy that was happening. I saw it as a blessing because every child is a blessing. But there was a reason. There was a purpose for this little girl. Lo and behold, her purpose gave me a purpose. Yes, I love my purpose of being a mom, but I'm talking even deeper than that. Grace came to me a little different. It came to me in a minute I needed to stop and pause. A minute my world had been flipped upside down. A minute where I felt my enemy and he was my friend. God's grace was shown to me through stopping to realize he is all I need. Hadley was part of my grace story. She showed up and was grace for me, grace for her daddy, and to this day has not stopped teaching me grace, especially when we have those 10 p.m. at night temper tantrums. When grace is in your life, it is something that is happening again and again. Grace upon grace. I had a plan, but it was not God's plan. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, God's grace was just the right amount for your purpose. I was somewhere else. I was not where he was calling me to go. I was trying to keep up with my peers. I was not made to be like them. I was made for my own purpose and calling. Hadley, my family, and that crazy time in 2017 and 2018 taught me that. Do I have it figured out? Goodness, no. I was called to be Caitlin. The D on the end stands for different. With God's grace and many tears, I have found that. I have found what sets me apart. The second half of the verse states that we should boast in our weakness so that Christ's power can reside in us. That when we admit our weakness, when we share when we have fallen short, that God will build us up. He will show grace onto us and lead us to our purpose. God hasn't given me grace for your life. It is not something you purchase or have. It is something that is given, and at the right time you feel it if you haven't already. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, and sometimes it hits you upside the head, but it is there. God wants to share it with you. Open your heart and let him lead you to your purpose, to wear the title of a faithful woman of God.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Than when we first begun.
Right now, it is hard to find grace at times. It is hard to stop and let God work in our lives. Today's culture has seemingly embraced two realities. If we disagree, we are divided. Only if we agree are we able to share grace with one another. You don't have to compromise your convictions to show compassion. Our humanity makes us prideful. Our Christianity makes us graceful. So let's stand up and put our pride to the side. Let's extend grace outside of our inner circles. May this year be about graceful unity. We don't have to agree on everything, but if we are truly putting Jesus' mission first, the unity will come. And it starts with grace, offering, receiving, and finally accepting God's grace. We hope that you all have enjoyed this evening. Thank you to everyone that helps make it possible. From the donations for the goodie bags to our musical talents, we thank you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace.